Morning. My name's Steve Mason from Bytes. I'm one of the sales managers here at Bytes. I'm just going to provide you a really quick rundown on Bytes for anyone who isn't aware of us, a brief piece on the purpose of the webinar, and then hand over to Tom Kendrick from Checkpoint. So Bytes is split into two areas, licensing and security. So the licensing side, you're probably aware, we're the largest Microsoft house in the UK and look after a number of other licensing areas such as Symantec, McAfee, Oracle, to name a few. We then have the security side where I sit, which from the slide on the screen you can see concentrates purely on perimeter and data security. So covering areas like firewalling, web security, email security, down to the endpoint with port control, hard disk encryption, remote access, and areas I suppose like advanced persistent threats. This allows us not to just be a jack of all trades, master of none, because we have a clear focus on both areas, which is split into different teams. So one of our key vendors, as you can probably tell, is Checkpoint, and has been for 10 odd years now, and we hold their 4-star elite accreditation. So a top level partner is a 4-star partner, and we're one above that, being a 4-star elite partner, which is an invite only club. The reason we hold this is because of our expertise in the technology and our support offering. We have the largest number of Checkpoint accredited engineers in the channel, and the main reason for being awarded the elite status is because of our support offering. We have a very unique service where we have no first line or second line. So when you call our help desk, you go straight into a senior, fully accredited escalation level Checkpoint engineer. This obviously saves a huge amount of time, as you're not asked sort of qualifying questions when you're normally speaking to those first and second line engineers. Our engineers on the help desk also on a 3-month rotation, so for 3 months they're out in the field attending customer sites, perform installations, upgrades, training, basically getting real world experience and an understanding hopefully of your network. They then come back onto the help desk for another 3 months. So this means when you're on the call to the person answering the phone, is hopefully already attended your site at some point and understands your network and is then in a good place to assist you as quickly as possible moving forward. It's also worth mentioning that 89% of our calls are resolved in-house, where the industry standard is around 30%. Really the only calls we need to escalate back to Checkpoint are RMAs and bug fixes, which again means our time to close support tickets is extremely quick. I've also included a Gartner quadrant on the screen which shows where Checkpoint are in the enterprise network firewall space, and I've been positioned there since around 1997, so it's nearly 20 years. So the reason you're joining the webinar today is obviously around the issues businesses are facing with targeted attacks like ransomware. I'm sure you've seen over the last few weeks and even the last few days everything that's been in the news, and on the screen are just a few of the latest news headlines. That we're sort of seeing this as the #1 topic really that we're being contacted about at the moment, and currently helping a number of organisations overcoming this issue. So that's enough for me, just a really quick rundown on Bytes. So I'll now hand over to Tom for the reason why you're really here, and we'll go from there. Thank you all. Tom, are you there?
I am indeed, yep.
Good stuff. Over to you then, Tom.
Great, thank you. So if, Dave, if you could pass across the screen to me, there we go. So I'll just share my screen. Perfect. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. So good morning, everybody. As discussed, my name is Tom Kendrick. I'm a European Threat Prevention Engineer here at Checkpoint, and I have been at Checkpoint for just around 6 or so years. I'm actually a former Bytes employee for those that may or may not know me already. So let's take a little look through and let's get on with the agenda. So what we're going to cover today is #1, covering off the problem. Okay, so we're going to have a little look at the issues with ransomware and how it's attacking the lifeblood of business. We'll look at how this can impact your organization. So we'll look at how it will disrupt service, may mean you lose data. Sometimes as well we're seeing fines, again depends who you are, or if not, at very least, reputation damage as well. And we'll look at a couple of options on how we can address this. And I think one of the things that we would like to leave you with today is technology alone will never solve any problem. There's always going to be a balance of technology and the people together. So we'll look at a few things on how both your own employees and external resources can be called upon to help you should you run into a problem with ransomware. At the end, again, if we have any questions, again, generally we would save those to the end, so pop them into the chat. And again, any other questions, you can either email me or contact Steve or the guys over at Bytes. So, the problem. Very, very simple example, and it's the kind of thing that we're seeing more and more often. If we take a look at how malware has evolved over the past few years, historically what we would tend to see was malware came into organizations as executables, as an archive, or some sort of binary file. Now, what we saw was most organizations were really quick to block these file types. And even myself, I remember back in the day working at Bytes, we would often change the file extension to try and get files to and from customers, to try and get it around security solutions that were in place at the time. And what then happened is these security solutions would often base their decision on file magic rather than on file extension. So again, if I sent you an email that said, here is file 123, please rename it to file .exe, that would have been a great way for me to try and circumvent the system, but as time's gone on, that's not an option anymore. Now, with those very, very simple avenues blocked, what has happened is the attackers and the bad guys have turned to approaches that we can't easily turn off. And they're also targeting the bigger weakness, which I suppose if we combine the two things, what we're seeing is organizations being targeted with file types that we know you have to accept. By that I mean Word documents. By that I mean Office files in general, Excel, PDFs, okay? And they're becoming increasingly clever at targeting people with authentic looking files. To give you a quick example of this, I was working with a partner just a few weeks ago, and they got sent a file which they thought we incorrectly detected. And the guy said, well, look at the pop-up message. The pop-up message is a notice from Microsoft saying that this is written in Office 2016, and therefore you need to enable the content and enable the updates to get the file to work. And when I turned around to the guy and said, well, Office 2016, Office 2013 and similar, they're all the same file type. So, okay, yes, it was a very, very good looking file. It had got the current kind of blank style and plain numbering style and graphic style that we see from Microsoft. But actually what this was just one of those modern day versions of, here is a file, please enable macros, please run some code, and then again, bad things will start to happen on your machine. Now, we're very much aware that, again, we need people to ensure that they are patching systems, because ultimately, without a vulnerability on your machine, these advanced attacks are far more limited in what they can do. So let's think about it. If everything was patched, if the file that we send to you is has a vulnerability contained within it to try and exploit that vulnerability, if your machine is patched, then you're not going to get hit with that problem. Okay? But we all know that actually keeping systems up to date is a very, very difficult task, especially with trying to maintain uptime numbers. We also see that the bad guys also target people at the right time of the month, the right time of the quarter, the right time of year, when we know they're not paying attention because they're busy with other things. So just a quick little example you can see here. In the bottom corner, you can see this little screenshot from our our environment, so our behind-the-scenes threat cloud environment, you can actually see in the lead up to the Christmas period, we saw a huge increase in the number of Zeus detections shown in Threat Cloud, because we saw people were being targeted with those attacks when people are thinking about other things like Christmas, parties, holidays, and similar. So, the modern problem. The modern problem is we have people working all over the place. So we have people who are working maybe from a cafe when they're out at lunch, and chances are, as much as that person is going to be doing their work, they're probably going to be looking at their own email as well. So I'm sure we've all seen the recent sort of VAT or HMRC messages where people are being sent these phishing messages claiming to have tax refunds or similar kind of links to get you to click or entice you to click these files. And what we're tending to find is when people are clicking on these modern bits of malware, generally the antivirus solution that they install on the corporate machine isn't capable of blocking these files. Now, in this example, we can have CryptoLocker or some other form of ransomware that infects that machine. Okay. Now, the downside here, obviously, is the data could be lost. Now, if you're lucky, the data's backed up, and hopefully, users being users, they have backed it up somewhere. We can re-image the machine, and we can get them back up and running again. But it does raise some questions, which is where else did these files go? Where did they come from? Will it come back to us? Was any data damaged or lost or stolen or sent to the bad guys? And these are the kind of questions that we see from the fallout from ransomware infecting customer networks. So really, to give us better security, we want to have a better understanding and better visibility of what's going on. Now, again, just as a quick point, it's very, very worthwhile, if you haven't done so, checking out our blog. So all the research that the guys do, so this is both R&D guys, threat research teams, everything is published onto the blog.checkpoint.com site. So if there's something appearing in the news and you're not quite sure about it, or you want a bit of extra insight on it, if you want some guidance on how to help prevent different attacks or attack families, then do have a look on that site. You'll see the kind of work that we're working on. Now, the impact. What have I seen? So personally, over the past maybe 3 months, 6 months, the kind of things that I've seen are, as we discussed, productivity loss. So I visited a telco who told me that their whole organization got told late on a Friday, don't use email this weekend. Okay, because unfortunately, again, it was actually went back to the HMRC and VAT message. They got sent to every employee a link that said, here's your VAT refund type thing, or here's your tax refund, and we only need 1 or 2 people to click. And chances are, in many of these attacks, the hit rate, even if it's 1%, if you've got a big enough user base, it doesn't matter. By that time, the malware can take hold, and then, as we discuss, it can spread throughout the network. We were also working with a customer in the US, and again, a slightly different view here. This was not actually a piece of ransomware that hit them, but this was a customer who used a cloud email service. And the problem sometimes with the cloud email services is, what's great about them is you can use them from everywhere, and what's bad about them is you can use them from everywhere. Now, unfortunately, this customer got shoulder surfed, and what happened was, when they were shoulder surfed, the bad guys saw the login credentials for this person. So they waited till they disappeared, they logged in from somewhere else, and they got access to all of their inbox and all of their sent information. And what we saw was an official looking message coming from exactly the right email address and sender, going to their clients, asking them to update their banking details and send the money elsewhere. And again, it only took a few people to do it, but when you're talking large organizations, that can have a huge financial impact on you. Other thing is, and again, I'm sure you've seen this yourselves, but we've seen a number of UK-based businesses and councils that have either lost data, lost customer information, or had information encrypted. And again, when you start to think about these dizzy high numbers that you often hear in the media about the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds or dollars that people lose, and you kind of think to yourself, well, that's not me, that's not real. One of the things that I kind of sort of look back to is some of the people that I've seen in the media recently, and actually the large number of customers, once that bad news gets into the media, how it impacts a customer, and then they turn to other providers for those services. So it does have a real tangible impact on us as users and us as IT professionals. We've also seen through the work that we do with our incident response team is some of the incidents that we've been involved with actually have been linked to funding of terrorist organizations and terrorist groups. So again, people always say kind of don't pay ransoms, and actually when we dig deep enough into what's going on, there's some really quite scary things that go on behind the scenes. So as Checkpoint, obviously with the world's largest dedicated pure play security vendor, what that means for us is that we have groups of people who behind the scenes can do malware research, reverse engineering, who are looking at vulnerabilities, researching the dark web, and all of the insight that we have feeds into our products and technologies. Let's be clear, ultimately what we're looking at here is let us do the work, let us do the research, let us come up with the protections so that you can just turn the technologies on and you're safe. Now, whatever we do, we know that there's always a chance that there may be a breach. So take a look, and I'm sure you do, at the Verizon report that comes out every year. We're often asked, well, how do I respond? How do I protect myself against these kind of events? And we were looking at some research done by Ponemon Institute, which looked at a number of both US and European organizations which had been breached. And what they were looking at was, did they truly understand the person or organization that attacked them? And you can see here that actually when we look at the who attacked me, how did they attack me, where, when, why did they attack me, generally when it comes to where, people know because they know the machines or systems that get impacted. But looking at some of these other questions, most times people don't really have the information that they need. And what we found quite worrying was when we look at the defense method, so how could we defend against this in the future, 2/3 of the people surveyed weren't able to actually answer the question of, if this happened again, what could I or would I do? So as far as the options, I think there are two things. There's always going to be a combination of both people and technology, as we've said. Now, behind the scenes, we do have an incident response team here at Checkpoint, and we'll discuss those guys and what they can do in a few minutes. But if we look at the technology side, what we're able to offer is an evasion-resistant sandbox. Now, for those of you that read the register, you probably have seen a couple of highlights just raised on a research paper and some work that's been done by the guys at Intel on some features that are going to add into their products in the future to handle advanced attacks such as ROP and JOP. Just to make you very much aware, that kind of defense against ROP attacks is one of the unique features that's inside the Checkpoint sandbox and has been there for around about a year already. So again, great news that actually we're kind of getting the press on some of the stuff via what Intel are going to release in the future. But those kind of protections are available in the Checkpoint sandbox, what we call our CPU level sandbox today. And we'll see what that does in just a minute. We have extraction, which lets us deliver clean content to the user quickly. What does that mean? We all know that sandboxing will take a few minutes. Okay, so while we have the fastest sandbox in the industry, we need to ensure that we don't halt business at the same time. So extraction allows us for document files, for Office files, for PDF files. It allows us to deliver a clean copy of the file to the user whilst the emulation is taking place behind the scenes. And we also have forensics. And forensics allows us to look at, understand, and investigate incidents that happen on the endpoint. So whilst we can cover the endpoint, we can cover the network, and we can cover cloud with things like Office 365, all of these products together give us the coverage that you need because of the different angles of attack that the bad guys may use. So let's see how the technology can help our users. So as far as the Checkpoint product, the Checkpoint Sandblast product, what we can do is we can deploy this either on the endpoint, as we've mentioned, or in our network via our gateways. And what we're looking at that data, and we can send it for emulation into Sandblast. Now, Sandblast here can be a cloud product using Checkpoint's own cloud service, or it can be a dedicated on-premise appliance. Once we've got a verdict on the file, we can return the verdict back to the end user device or the gateway and either prevent, allow, whatever the connection based on your policy. What we can also do is share this information with your permission up into Threat Cloud, which means that other customers who see the same file, if there's a malicious verdict, they will get the answer very, very quickly without having to wait for emulation anyway. So if we look at what sandboxing does, so if we cover first of all the traditional sandbox, the goal of the sandbox is to intercept files, as we say, coming into the network. And based on these files arriving in the network, we're going to look at registry activity, network connections, file system activity, system processes, so things that we can see the file do. We can also look at APIs and API calls as well. And within the product, we also have the capability when dealing with executables to invoke our machine learning engine, which also can work on the behavior of the file at the same time. Now, if we're emulating the file, first of all, we need to discuss what we can cover. So the kind of things that we can cover are mail, web, and Windows traffic. We can inspect Java, Flash, executables, archives, PDF, documents, so a whole suite of files can be covered. So any of those protocols, any of those files, when we see the data, we hand it off to our sandbox. The sandbox allows us to run different operating systems. So today we have XP 7 and 8.1 with Windows 10 obviously under development, and the option to do custom images if you wish with our professional services. We can give you and offer you both 32 and 64-bit different 64-bit operating systems. So again, it gives you a wider variety of platforms against which you can test. And again, we'll monitor the behavior of the file. Now, if we see something malicious, the unique thing that we can do is we can hold that connection and prevent the bad file from ever getting down to the machine in the first place. So our key message here is that we are a prevention-based product that's trying to avoid the first ever hit on your network. And then, as we said, once we've got the file that was unknown, we turn it into a known and share it into Threat Cloud instantly, so that we're then able to protect other customers from the same file. So that's our traditional sandbox. Now, as we said, we have also got this unique CPU level capability built into the product. So what is it and what does it do? Well, we asked ourselves a question. We know, as we discussed, that any really advanced attack must try and exploit a vulnerability. So we asked ourselves a question, what if we could detect the exploit rather than waiting for the evasive malware, which is what the traditional sandboxes do in this industry? So what we do is, when you send specific files to our sandbox, we can detect whether it's worth sending them for further inspection in the CPU level engine as well. And what happens is we enable a feature used or created by Intel where we start to collect the CPU flow data. And if you look on the bottom right, how we can kind of visualize this is think of yourself taking a journey from point A to point Z. We know that as you travel between these different places, there will be certain road points or crossings or junctions that you will take. And if you're going to go back, again, it makes sense to go back that same safe way. When a program runs normally, we know that different functions will get called, and each time a function finishes, again, it will return back to where it came from. Now, in a very advanced attack, when they use what's called a ROP chain, we know that the goal of the bad guys is to try and create or create a situation where they move the stack pointer over to their shellcode. And what we can do with our software is detect that incorrect behavior in our product. Again, this means that because we're working outside the traditional sandbox, it's as impossible as we can make it be for the bad guys to try and evade or hide or circumvent this system. The other product we discussed was extraction. And again, let's take a little look at what that does for us. Now, as we said, we know any emulation product will always take a few moments. Hopefully, we have the result cached, but let's say this is a new file, first time, never been seen before. If we have the situation, what we're able to do is take the original document and rebuild it. And we can do that in just a couple of seconds. This means, as a result, that we can deliver the end user a file in one of two ways. Either we will keep the format as was. So, for example, if I started with an Excel file, I will deliver an Excel file. But in the conversion and reconstruction process, I will remove active content. So, for example, macros, code, Visual Basic, scripts, links, all of these things can get removed from the file. Again, where this benefits me is it removes the opportunity for the use of ransomware, is to convert the file to PDF. Again, slightly less user-friendly, but about as secure as we can be, and that's what we do at Checkpoint. Okay, so if I was sent a Word document, I will be delivered a PDF file. Now, obviously, because we don't differentiate between maybe good or bad macros and code, there is the opportunity that you may want access to the original file. So we deliver you the clean file with no delay, as we discussed, using threat extraction. Behind the scenes, the file is being emulated, and if the user does need the original file, they can click on the link as we see on the left. They can confirm that the file is trusted, coming from someone we know, give a reason, and then as long as our sandbox gives you a clean verdict on the file, then yes, you can get access to the original without any help desk interaction. So let's see how we can work these products together. So when a file arrives, if the file supports both emulation and extraction, then we will extract the file and give you the clean version straight away. Surrounding this, though, at the same time, we have both the OS level and CPU level sandbox. So here, again, we can stop the unknown malware and the really sophisticated advanced malware attacks that the bad guys are trying to do. The result is you will get delivered the clean file, the extracted file, but anything malicious will get removed as it enters your network. I think it's also worth pointing out here again that there are other capabilities within the Checkpoint suite which can also help if you have had something go on. And by this I mean the data loss prevention product. And where this is useful is if you have an attacker that does try and compromise the system, the DLP blade can sit on your gateway and it can look at the traffic leaving your network and understand if that traffic is of a sensitive nature, again based on what you deem as being sensitive. So it's just something where, because with Checkpoint you have this one platform and you can add these additional technologies as you wish, it just gives you that extra confidence that whatever is passing to or through your gateway is clean. So we've looked at how the technology can help the people, but now let's look how people can also back up the technology. And I want to just spend a couple of minutes looking at what the incident response guys do. So when we're looking at the kind of flow of an incident, detect, understand, and respond, we at Checkpoint kind of want to take a different view. Our view really is we want to prevent anything coming in the first place. If there is an issue, we want to understand exactly what, we want to be able to respond to it, yes, and also help you remediate. Okay, so these are the kind of things that we try and do. Now, as far as Checkpoint's response team are concerned, there are a number of places where they can be contacted. And I would just like to say here, this is a very, very select group of people. These guys do not replace the relationship you have with Bytes. Okay, so these guys are a group of people that Bytes and yourselves as customers can call upon when you need them. But the best people, as was mentioned by Steve earlier, that know your network is going to be the guys at Bytes, and it's going to be yourselves. These guys can assist in supporting you at these different stages of an attack. So when we're looking pre-attack, we can help with evaluating you as an organization. If we know your industry and the kind of field that you work in, again, because we're monitoring dark web and various sources, so I myself get updates about the different types of customer that may be targeted from information that we're hearing on the dark web, and again we can share that information with our IRT customers. There's also strategy and planning projects that they do where again they understand you, what you're all about, not just from a technology point of view. And I should just highlight here, these guys do not just work on Checkpoint. They're an industry-wide vendor agnostic group of people. Now, should you have an incident, again, they can help with things like DDoS, data loss, infestations of malware or suspicious events going on. And then post-attack, once they've taken steps to limit or remediate the damage, again, they can assist with analysis of the event, forensics, looking at what's gone on inside the network. They've got their own malware lab, and again, they can give you assistance on reporting and feedback to the board or the execs as and when you need. So to give you a quick example of the group and what they do, this is actually a case from the US. So we're just going to show you a little timeline. So last year, one of our IRT team got contacted following an incident within a school district in the US. Now, the reason they were contacted is actually one of our employees was a member of the board of governors at this particular school, and again, they'd had an event go on, which we'll see just unfold in just a second. Now, the incident response guys, they requested firewall logs and proxy logs. Okay, so again, this is post-event. This was not checkpoint gateway, not checkpoint proxy, nothing to do with checkpoint in this environment, but they're able to understand, and they've got enough experience and tools available to them to understand and parse and work through the data that they got from the customer. So they started to analyze the logs, and they started to find some interesting things relating to the source addresses for a number of messages. So it took them a couple of days, but what they found was 14,000 suspicious IP addresses registered to one Nigerian company. And again, this started to ring alarm bells. So what they then started to do was kind of rewind the clock a little bit further. And what they found was, in this it's a special needs school district in the US, all of the teachers' details are published online. And what they found was that site had been scraped, and on the 15th of July, messages were being sent to the teachers. Again, new year, new people starting. They didn't or weren't able to differentiate between the good, here is the access to the new system, and the malicious, please enter your credentials here type messages. So what we found was on the 16th, we started to see teachers going to access a suspicious site. And by accessing that site, a piece of malware was installed on the machine. So what then happened was when the staff started to sign into and sign up for the payroll and sort of internal systems, the bad guys were able to steal access to these web-based payment systems. And again, this is sometimes the challenge of when you move things to cloud, as we saw with the email example earlier when the customer was shoulder surfed. Sometimes moving to cloud gives you great benefit because you can access everything from anywhere, but it also gives the bad guys the same opportunities as well. It was on the 31st of August that we saw the last access to this malicious site, and actually what we noticed to prepaid credit cards. And again, obviously, on the 31st, when people didn't get paid, that was when the day after we were contacted and we were able to start the investigation. Okay, so this is the kind of work that they get involved with. Now, just briefly looking at the agent, and again, this is another place where we find that the insight that we can get from the endpoint really does add to the whole picture that you can get in your organization should you have an incident. So if we just revisit what we saw earlier, the goal of what we're trying to do with the agent is obviously to prevent these unknown attacks or 0 days or unknown malware from getting onto your machine. We're trying to identify and contain any infection on the machine, and we're also trying to offer automatic incident analysis and remediation such that the damage to your machines or business is limited. So just touching on that example we saw earlier, when someone had that crypto locker event and they were working remotely, they're not in behind a gateway, they clicked on the phishing link, it downloaded the file over HTTPS, the AV didn't pick it up, and then crypto locker gets onto their machine. What could have happened? What could we have done to help? Now, we're answering with the agent the questions like, how did the malware get in? And because this is a piece of software that sits on the endpoint and records activity, we're able to see all of the activity on how people accessed the malicious site, with what program, what the file was called, and the programs that were run or downloaded to trigger that event. So we can answer the question, how did the malware get in? We can also see, again, because we're recording everything on the machine, we're able to track back from a trigger event, which may have been a binary file talking to a command and control server, back across reboots to the exploit stage. And where the exploit ran and dropped a piece of malware onto the machine, we can link back and say the reason this happened is because the attack origin was this website, which you visited using Chrome and downloaded, for example, a file, or you got you're hit with a drive-by. We can help with understanding it's an infection because the software understands the kind of activities that the bad guys are trying to do on your machine. And again, we're able to automatically respond and react because, again, the insight that we can give leads to automatic remediation and then system-wide checking to see if any other incidents can be uncovered elsewhere in the network. Okay, so just in summary, as we wrap up, we have a series of technologies. Okay, and again, they're generally layered because the ways that the bad guys work is kind of along the lines of the cyber kill chain. So we have IPS, and IPS will help us stop known vulnerabilities. Again, we have anti-malware, which again will help us prevent known malware files. Emulation will help us with the unknown files that are coming towards the network and gives us that pre-infection capability still. Extraction helps us remove the possibility of malware from documents where they have active content by removing the active content, stripping the file, and delivering the user a clean file quickly. And again, both post and pre-infection, we have anti-bot that will look at the conversations, as we've seen now, both from the endpoint and from the network, to prevent bot damage. And all of these technologies feed into and learn from and share information to Threat Cloud. So again, because we're Checkpoint and we have the size of customer base that we do and the intelligence that we do and the researchers that we do, it gives you the real-time intelligence that you need to give you those protections. So just final thing, as far as summary is concerned, again, our goal really here is to prevent the malware and avoid any sort of disruption. We want to give you the clean content fast, so we want to give you the protection from the 0 day, we want to give you the sandboxing, but we know that we can only do that if we are business aware and we have the capabilities that we have in extraction as well to give you what you need now. Because of the breadth of places where we can run, so network, endpoint, cloud, Office 365, we've got the breadth and the technologies to see the data entering and possibly data leaving. We can see the threats that are trying to come towards your network. We can give you those features to let you understand and then remediate in your network if needs be. So what we'll do now, I say if there are any questions, by all means contact your Bytes team. But for those that need, that's my email address. And what I shall do is I'll hand back to Steve and Dave. And again, if we've got any questions, we'll do those now. If not, we can handle them later on if we wish.
Thanks very much, Tom. Hopefully everybody can hear me. We have had one question just through, which I think I know what answer you're going to give, but I'll open up to you, which is the good old lateral spread question. How do you handle infected laptops plugged into the LAN? So obviously a lot of what we're talking about is gateway stuff. Yeah, if you just cover that off quickly, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course, Cam. So as far as any lateral movement, that is where the Sandblast agent comes in. So though we kind of don't shout about it as a feature, built into the software behind the scenes, you have compliance checks and you have a firewall. So if, for example, any detection appears, so we might see an antivirus event, we might see a bot event, we may see an emulation event, we may see just behavioral events from what forensics is learning. Any of those things can turn us into a situation where we decide that now the machine is out of compliance with the kind of standards that we want. We will automatically remediate the machine and clean anything up, but at the same time we can also restrict what that machine does, preventing it from infecting further things and spreading in the network. Again, obviously because of what we have on the endpoint, the firewall that is available to anyone with endpoint products will, without doubt anyway, restrict the inbound connections to the device. Okay?
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks, Tom. Couple of other ones. The first one is about how long it would take to emulate files and what the impact of the emulation happening is.
And okay,
so second one, which kind of then leads on from that, I guess, a little bit, is how can people try and evaluate it? What somebody wants to have a go with it. So.
Okay, so as far as time to emulate, on average, if it's a clean file, we're generally less than a minute. For a malicious file, we emulate a few times, so it can be up to 4 minutes. But obviously, remember that we do have threat extraction for Office files and PDF. So as far as evaluation, there's a couple of things you can do. If you've got sample files, we've actually got a website you can upload files to. So you can just check out what your verdict is, kind of completely easy and simply and no effort. But if you want to actually evaluate it in your network, again, it's possible to do a checkup. So you may have heard of what's called security checkup, which is where we can get a gateway listening to your data. So we can see anything that's passing in and out of your network, and also we can see all of your emails. Now, if your emails are encrypted, so for example, if the TLS encrypted, if you can BCC or sort of journal those emails to us as an MTA, again, we can also help you see what the product would have seen in that situation as well. And again, it doesn't matter really in that case whether you're a Checkpoint customer or not, because this solution can be completely standalone as well, to also help kind of non-Checkpoint houses.
Cool. Thanks very much, Tom. That's great. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody. Thanks very much for joining. Tom, thanks very much for your time. It's really, really appreciated. We'll wrap up there. This will be available as a recording online shortly, probably in the next couple of days. And if you do have any questions, then obviously please do come back to your Bytes account manager or back to Tom on the email address he gave on the slide. Tom, thanks again very much. Really appreciated. And everybody else, thanks for your time today.